Simon Danczuk's here, former Labour MP, because he's got plenty to say about the grooming gang scandal. He revealed towards the end of last year that he was effectively silenced by the chief of the Labour Party in Westminster when he wanted to raise issues about the grooming gangs in his part of the world, in Rochdale I think it was, and he was told, no, we don't want to do that, we don't want to go there. We've got today Yvette Cooper basically announcing that there's going to be some new, shall we say, regional, not even regional really, just local inquiries. Let's have a look at her announcement.
We will also provide stronger national backing for local inquiries where they are needed to get truth and justice for victims and survivors.
Yeah, but will they get truth and justice for victims and survivors? Because Labour are blasted on the front page of the Mail today for the toothless grooming probes, which won't actually demand that anybody appears before the panels. It won't demand that anybody necessarily has to be held accountable. So, Simon, a very good morning to you. I don't know whether this is I think it's a step in the right direction. I think it's an admission by Labour that they got it wrong, but it's a sort of halfway house, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think it's even a halfway house, to be honest, Mike. What we learned from this announcement from the Home Secretary is that they do not care about the victims of these rape gangs, and they care very much about those that covered up the abuse. The truth is, for the uninitiated to British politics, this is what you call a political fudge. And so you've got Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, trying to move the agenda on so that we don't scrutinise those that covered it up. The local inquiries that they've announced don't give the powers to summons people. They don't give them the powers to insist on evidence being given. They're only covering 5 areas, local areas, when we know there are over 50 areas where this type of rape gang abuse went on. So they're trying to move the agenda on. That's the reality of it. It might have worked in the 1990s, the sort of thing that the Blair government did, but we're in a very different period now. Social media is very different. The public are outraged by this issue. It's a national scandal, a national justice criminal scandal, this, and we need to see action taken. And I don't think the public will stop campaigning for this until we get it.
No, I think that's absolutely right, because we've got more and more victims coming forward now, thankfully, because they've seen other people doing it, and it obviously always encourages these poor young women who have been so brutalised and so terribly treated, but they've got now the courage to come forward. We've got one in the Daily Mail today, Scarlett, aged 19, told how she was ferried around the north of England by older men, drugged and used for sex. She's a lovely-looking young woman. She was picked upon when she was just a schoolgirl by these horrible individuals. At the age of 13, she wanted to be a police officer, and she wasn't particularly a working class kid. She was a middle class child, but she had a frightening late night incident at a bus station, and she was then found herself placed under this gang's influence, and it all went horribly wrong from there. So, I mean, this is a story that touches far more people, I think, than we even know. Daily Express has got a different victim on the front page, saying that she was repeatedly raped as a child by an Asian grooming gang, and she now wants a full national inquiry. I mean, at least wouldn't it have been better if they'd said, look, let's do it regionally then? Take perhaps, the Greater Manchester area, which might include Oldham, which might include Rochdale, and look at that. Take, Yorkshire, which might include Leeds and Bradford and those kind of cities, Surely they could have made it more, far-reaching than it is now.
Yeah, absolutely. They could have done so much more than they announced yesterday in this statement. But they don't want to reveal those that covered it up. Labour are culpable in this. Labour politicians are culpable in having covered it up, and they don't want that to come to light. This is the reality of it. But the public expect the perpetrators to be prosecuted. That's a given, isn't it? We expect the police to do their job now. But what we also want is those that covered it up, public servants, local politicians, national politicians, to actually reveal who they were and why they covered it up, and then to see some form of punishment towards them. That's what the public are calling out for. And until they get that, they won't stop campaigning on it.
No, exactly right. And I mean, Maggie Oliver was on with me earlier this week, and, you know, all of Keir Starmer's kind of supporters and the people who say that, oh, he did a great job bringing this to light, you know, she disputes that. You know, everybody says, oh, Keir Starmer was the only one that actually got the prosecutions actually up and running. She says that he should have done more. She says, and I take her view for it more than I would take his view for it, she says that he should have started prosecuting these cases much earlier than he did, which was very much at the end of his tenure as Director of Public Prosecutions.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I think he came into position in 2008, didn't do anything at all on it until 2012. Right. There were cases that went through the CPS that weren't actioned under his leadership, which could have been. So I agree with Maggie Oliver. Maggie and I worked on the Rochdale grooming scandal back in 2012. I met her back then well over 10 years ago, and we campaigned on these issues. And she's a very strong voice on this. And I think we are at one in saying we want to identify those people who covered this up, prosecute the perpetrators, but uncover those that covered it up. That's the key issue here, and we're not getting it yet, but I don't think people will stop until we get a proper, full national inquiry. Absolutely
right. And Maggie knows who those people are as well. She hasn't named them to me, but she says she knows of at least 2 senior police officials who were involved in cover-ups, and she can happily name them to any inquiry that wants to ask her that question. But one final thing, I've got a text here from Gurdeep who says, good morning, Mike. About these Muslim grooming rape gangs, no one has mentioned how the leaders of these gangs have profited from all of this. These profits are then being spent on their own families, so even families need to be prosecuted, perhaps, for their involvement. And that's a good point. Nobody has mentioned that.
That's a really good point, actually, in terms of there's no doubt about it. Some of these gangs were mixed up in drug dealing and other nefarious acts. I'm pretty sure on that. And you're right. People in the community would have known about this and stayed silent. And some of it, in terms of those that covered it up, it's about, in Labour's example, it's about not wanting to upset the Muslim vote. But it's also about not wanting to damage multiculturalism. And some people in the wider community will be concerned about that. Well, we have to have an honest national conversation about where we're getting multiculturalism wrong. And that's what's required now. And that would shine some light on the point that your listener has made.
Yeah, absolutely right. Simon, good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed, Simon.